So today I'm going to get some lead hot. First thing I'm going to do is turn on the lead, let it start getting warm. I also like to take my mold and I set it on top so it gets warm. Obviously, dealing with hot lead, everything needs to be warm. And that's part of the tricks I'll show you as we're making a spinnerbait. Getting the lead all the way around the wire and the hook can sometimes be a challenge. And I got a little trick that I use that increases my productivity. And then we'll go moving to put color on, and then we'll put the blades and the skirt on. It's a pretty simple process. I usually do it in waves. I'll get the lead hot and I'll make plenty of spinner baits, probably enough to try and last a whole season. And then I'll also make some swim jigs that I use a ton. And I also convert those into bladed jigs, and I convert the spinner baits into buzz baits, and we'll go into all of that. I set up a little workspace. I got a little area here. I got a little piece of wood that I'm going to use. It'll help hold the wire forms straight while I'm lining everything up. And I got my hooks set out. I got 2/0, 3/0, and 4/0 base for the different size lures. Read your mold. It'll tell you what forms to use and what hooks to use. And then you're just going to grab a wire and then the hook, and I'll show that many times, but just real important that you keep everything lined up. So 2/0 and 1/4 ounce. I'm trying to use a piece of wood to match the angle so that the lure wire is set up in the right spot. I do that for my other sizes. And I can't stress enough to be careful when you're doing all this. The mold gets pretty hot and you're going to heat the wires up, and I use gloves when I'm messing with it. So you get your hooks and your wires laid out in your mold, and then you grab your heat gun and you put it on there for a good, I don't know, just 10 seconds, 15 seconds. I just want to make sure the wires are hot. I'm going to use gloves, so it doesn't much matter. Just a little bit. Heat gun on a high is pretty hot. So yes, be very careful when you're dealing with hot lead and hot wires and hooks and whatnot. Then I'm going to close it, and keeping the wires in the right place while you're closing it is really important. So always look at it and make sure I got a good close. Look at the mold while it's empty and close it and see what it looks like. And the wires move around a little bit, so I always try to keep them in a straight position. And then I'm just going to fill it up. Each slot. And then it's just going to cool, and you can see it cools really quick as far as in a usable state. Still really soft, but just that quick, it's ready to go. Now, that particular one didn't pour as good as the others did. Wish I'd have got the wire just a little bit hotter, but you can see the lead didn't go all the way down around the hook completely. So when that happens, I can either decide to use that as a second, little trial and error kind of lure, experiment a little bit, or I can just put it back carefully in the pot and it'll melt the lead off of the hook and the wire, and then I can clean them off and reuse them. I do a little bit of that. I don't mind a few bad ones. Like I said, as long as the collar's on there enough for it to hold a skirt, I don't worry too much about it. I wouldn't sell one like this. But I'll keep it for myself. So I'll go through it real quick again. I always keep my lures separate, 3/8, 1/2 ounce, and 1/4. I can usually tell by the hooks which ones they are, but grab a wire, grab the appropriate hook. There's a little hook end on the wire, And I just put the hook eye through that. It becomes one piece. The lead will hold the rest of it together. That's just to get you started. Just that easy. Got 3 lures in there. To make the swim jigs, it's a very similar process. Again, I got 3 different sizes. There's 1/2 ounce, 3/8, and 5/16, all within the same mold. And so I have a hook that's got a little bend on it for the jig because it's a little different than the spinnerbait. It's got a little, I believe it's a 60-degree bend on it. So you just set that eyelet where the eyelet is on the mold and set the hook in place. There's also a little piece that goes in, and that's for the weed guard that goes in after the fact. But we're going to create a hole inside the lead that receives the weed guard. Anyway, you're just going to set your hooks and set your pins in. A little easier than the spinnerbait. Doesn't take too much time. That makes all the difference in the world. Just be careful with your stuff. The tip of that gun gets really hot. The mold gets really hot. The lead is always hot. Pretty quick turnaround. So when your lure comes out of your mold, it's got a little extra piece on here. That's from where the mold lets the lead in. So we're going to pop that off of there real quick, and then we're going to just clean the edges up just a little bit. So what I usually do is just grab the extra piece and wobble it back and forth till it busts off. And then you got more like your jig. And then any mold marks or little raised areas, I'll take a knife or a file and just kind of run them down. Now, this particular jig has a collar that helps hold the skirt on, and then it's got a point on it that helps hold your soft plastic on there. And so don't remove that. You just want to knock down any mold marks that you don't like. I like to leave that point on there if I can, because the paint will also make that point stronger, and it'll help hold your baits on there really good. But I didn't do much cleanup. It looks just fine. Maybe just a little file on the back of it just to knock down that little point. But that is really pretty much ready for paint. And we'll get into that next. Spinnerbaits are the same. They just got the extra piece on there. Just grab it like I do with the other. Rock it back and forth till it busts off. And then just knock any high spots down with a file or a knife. And sometimes there's little extra pieces from between the edges of the mold, and I'll just knock that stuff off real quick too. And the paint will hide a lot of that, so you don't have to go too crazy, depending on what kind of paint you're using. But I like the detail of these lures. So here they are after I've broken the extra pieces off. There are 10 size of each jig in spinnerbait, so 30 jigs and 30 spinnerbaits. They just still got to knock off the mold marks. I buy all my wires and hooks and beads from online stores. Bass Pro, Cabela's, and major sporting good places are going to have some of the molds and some of the different melting pots. I buy most of mine all from one place. Online store, have it shipped directly to the house.